It was a typical morning. The sun was just starting to rise, casting a soft golden light over the quiet streets. People were beginning their day, some rushing to work, some jogging, and others simply enjoying the calm before the day became busy. Among them was a man who had a habit of taking the same route every morning, walking to the small coffee shop near the corner of the street. This had become his little ritual, a small moment of comfort before stepping into the responsibilities that awaited him. He pushed open the door to the coffee shop, and the familiar aroma of coffee beans and freshly baked pastries greeted him like an old friend. The shop was modest, not too big, but warm and inviting. The wooden tables and chairs had a rustic charm, and the soft music playing in the background added to the cozy atmosphere. He smiled at the barista, a young woman who always greeted him with a cheerful hello and a quick nod of recognition. He stepped up to the counter and placed his usual order, a simple cup of black coffee. As he waited, he noticed a man standing at the end of the counter looking a little out of place. The stranger seemed nervous, his hands fidgeting with the coins he was holding, and his eyes darting around as if searching for something. There was a tiredness about him, a heaviness in his posture that made the man feel a strange sense of concern. The stranger's order was simple as well, a small cup of coffee, but when it came time to pay, he realized he didn't have enough money. He shuffled the coins in his hand, counting them again and again, each time coming up short. The man behind him watched quietly, feeling a pull to help, though he wasn't sure why. There was no reason he had to step in, no obligation, but something inside him nudged him forward. Without thinking too much, he stepped up and handed his card to the barista, saying, "I'll pay for his coffee as well." The barista looked at him with a smile, and the stranger looked up, surprised. There was a moment of hesitation, as if he wasn't used to someone showing kindness without expecting anything in return. His eyes were filled with a mixture of relief and embarrassment. "Thank you," the stranger said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. There was a vulnerability in it that made the man feel a little pang in his chest. He simply nodded and offered a warm smile, the kind that came naturally, without any thought of recognition or reward. The stranger took his coffee and found a seat by the window, glancing occasionally at the man who had paid for him. There was a tension in his shoulders, a story hidden behind his tired eyes, and the man couldn't help but feel curious. He wondered what had brought this stranger here, what kind of morning he had, and why something as simple as a cup of coffee seemed to matter so much. The man took his own coffee and found a seat nearby. He sipped slowly, enjoying the warmth and the rich taste, but his mind kept drifting back to the stranger. There was something about the way he carried himself, the quiet struggle visible in his expression, that left a mark. It was as if in that brief interaction, he had been given a glimpse into a life very different from his own. The coffee shop continued to fill with people. Students came in with backpacks, chatting about assignments. Office workers hurried in, taking their orders to go, already thinking about the meetings and tasks ahead. Despite the busyness, there was a calm rhythm to the place, a gentle pause in the middle of the city's hustle. The man noticed small details, the way the sunlight hit the counter, casting soft shadows, the faint scent of cinnamon from a nearby pastry display, the quiet conversations that blended into the background music. It all felt comforting, grounding, and he allowed himself to simply be present. He glanced at the stranger again. The man had taken out a notebook and was writing something, though he couldn't see what. Occasionally, he would pause and look out the window, staring at the street as if searching for something he couldn't quite name. There was a sadness there, a weight that seemed almost tangible. The man felt a strange connection, an instinctive desire to offer more than just a cup of coffee, though he knew better than to intrude. Minutes passed, and the coffee shop gradually became louder with the arrival of more customers. The stranger finished his coffee and stood up, hesitating for a moment before leaving. Their eyes met briefly, and the man offered another small smile. This time there was a flicker of something different in the stranger's expression. Gratitude, yes, but also a sense of relief, a tiny light in the middle of his exhaustion. The man watched as he left the shop, disappearing into the flow of people outside. He finished his own coffee in silence, feeling an unexpected sense of satisfaction. It wasn't about recognition or praise. It was about a small connection, a moment of shared humanity that left a warmth behind. He realized that sometimes the simplest actions, paying for someone's coffee, offering a smile, could ripple in ways one could never predict. As he walked back onto the street, the morning had grown brighter. The sun was higher now, spilling light onto the buildings and sidewalks. People were moving with purpose, their faces a mix of determination, worry, and hope. He thought about the stranger, about the small gesture that had meant so much, and wondered what the rest of his day would hold. There was a strange sense of anticipation, a feeling that something important had begun, even if he couldn't see it yet. The man continued his routine, walking to the next stop on his way to work, but his mind kept drifting back to the coffee shop and the stranger. He thought about how life could be fragile, how a single moment could change the course of a day or even a life. There was a humbling realization that even ordinary people, living ordinary lives, had the power to make a difference, sometimes without even knowing it. He didn't know it at the time, but that morning, that simple act of kindness would be the start of something significant. It was a small decision, almost instinctive, to pay for a stranger's coffee, yet it had set in motion a chain of events that neither of them could have anticipated. The man walked on, unaware of how profoundly that brief interaction would shape the day, the lives involved, and the understanding of the power of human connection. The city around him was alive, people rushing past, cars honking, the distant hum of construction mixing with the chatter of pedestrians. Amid the chaos, there was a quiet lesson hidden in the morning's small act. Sometimes kindness doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It comes quietly, in subtle ways, in moments that seem insignificant at first but carry immense meaning. The man carried that thought with him, feeling a warmth that lingered far longer than the coffee itself. As he reached his office building, he paused for a moment, looking back at the street. The coffee shop was still there, still buzzing with life, and he smiled to himself. The world moved forward as it always did, but he had taken part in something quietly extraordinary, something that reminded him of the simple, profound truth. Small acts of care and attention could touch lives in ways that were impossible to measure, and sometimes they could even change the course of a life. And on that ordinary morning, with the sun climbing higher in the sky, that realization settled in his heart, subtle but powerful, like the gentle warmth of the first sip of coffee. After leaving the coffee shop, the man tried to focus on his day, but the image of the stranger lingered in his mind. There was something about the man's tired eyes and the quiet gratitude he had shown that kept replaying in his thoughts. It wasn't unusual for him to notice people around him, but this time it felt different. It was as if their brief encounter had created a small connection, one that silently insisted on being remembered. He walked down the streets he knew so well, streets he had passed countless times, yet today they seemed alive with unnoticed details. The cracks in the pavement, the flickering streetlights, the small shop windows, all of it felt more vivid. He passed a woman struggling with a heavy shopping bag, a child who had dropped his school books in the middle of the sidewalk, and an elderly man moving slowly with the aid of a cane. Normally, he might have ignored them or offered only a passing glance, but today, he felt a heightened awareness of the people around him, a sense that everyone had a story, a struggle, or a moment where a simple kindness could matter. At work, he tried to concentrate on his tasks, but he found his mind wandering. He remembered the stranger sitting by the window, the hesitant smile and the quiet words of thanks. He wondered what the stranger's day would be like after that small act. Would it give him a moment of relief in a heavy morning? Would he feel seen, if only for a little while? These questions lingered unanswerable, but they reminded him that people carried unseen burdens invisible to most. During his lunch break, he decided to take a walk, wanting to clear his mind. He strolled through a nearby park, noticing the small interactions of people, the jogger helping a child tie her shoelaces, a young couple sharing a sandwich on a bench, a man tossing crumbs to pigeons and smiling as they gathered around. There was a quiet beauty in these small, unnoticed moments of human kindness. Each small act seemed to ripple outward, creating subtle shifts in the day of those involved. He thought about how his own small gesture at the coffee shop might have been like that, a tiny spark in someone else's day. The memory of the stranger felt heavier now, not in a troubling way, but as if there was something unresolved, a thread that needed to be followed. He couldn't explain why he felt this connection so strongly. It wasn't his habit to dwell on strangers, yet he found himself hoping that man was all right, that his day hadn't gotten worse, and that somehow his small act had made a difference. He realized that kindness, even small, could matter far beyond what anyone could see. As the afternoon passed, he noticed himself looking at people differently. He saw the exhaustion in a mother's eyes as she guided her child through a crowded street, the anxiety in a young man's hurried pace, the quiet despair in a man sitting alone on a park bench. He thought about the power of noticing these moments, of pausing just long enough to make a difference. It was strange to feel so connected to strangers, yet today the world seemed full of unspoken stories, each waiting for a small gesture of care. By the time he returned home, he felt both tired and strangely awake, as if his morning had given him a new awareness of life around him. He prepared a simple meal, ate quietly, and tried to let the day settle. But even in the solitude of his apartment, the stranger's face kept returning like a question without an answer. He realized that small actions, simple choices, had a way of echoing, affecting lives in ways he might never see. And while he had simply wanted to help in that one moment, he understood now that he had become part of a larger story, one that he could not fully grasp yet. That evening, he took a walk through the neighborhood again, this time along quieter streets. The sun had started to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched across the pavement. He noticed how the streetlights flickered on, one by one, and how the city seemed to breathe differently in the fading light. There were fewer people now, and the stillness of the evening gave him space to reflect. He thought about the stranger's nervous hands, the way he had looked at the coins as if the world had weighed heavily on him. There was a fragility there, a human vulnerability that touched him deeply. He remembered the stranger's brief words, the soft, "thank you," and realized how significant that moment had been. Sometimes the world moves too fast for people to notice one another, but small gestures could pierce through the noise, reaching someone exactly when it was needed. He thought about his own life and the routines he followed without question, the people he passed without truly seeing. Today had reminded him that awareness, attention, and kindness could create unexpected consequences, connecting people in ways that might never be fully understood. As night fell, he returned to his apartment, feeling a quiet anticipation that he couldn't explain. It was a strange mix of curiosity and concern, a sense that the day had only begun in its significance. He wondered what would happen next, how this small act might unfold, and whether the stranger would encounter more challenges or find a moment of relief from his troubles. He realized that life was fragile, full of moments where a single decision could alter its course, and that every human interaction had the potential to matter. The man went to bed that night with thoughts of connection and empathy swirling in his mind. He reflected on the subtle ways people could impact each other, the unseen ripples of care and attention. He felt a deep sense of responsibility, not in a burdensome way, but as an understanding that his actions, no matter how small, could touch lives profoundly. And even as he drifted into sleep, he knew that the story was far from over, that tomorrow would bring its own moments of challenge, opportunity, and perhaps even discovery. He did not know it yet, but the morning's simple act of kindness had already begun to change not just the stranger's day, but the course of events in ways that neither of them could predict. The image of the stranger, the feeling of connection, and the awareness of how small gestures could matter would stay with him, guiding his thoughts and choices in the days to come. And in that quiet reflection, he felt a deep, unspoken truth. Sometimes life gives people the chance to be a small part of something larger, a chance to impact the world in ways that only reveal themselves over time. The next morning, the man woke up with a sense of purpose that he could not explain. It was still early, and the city was slowly coming alive with the sounds of traffic and distant chatter. The memory of the stranger from the coffee shop lingered stronger than before. He felt compelled to walk to the park near his apartment, a quiet place where he often thought about life. But today it seemed as if something important was waiting for him there. He walked briskly through the streets, noticing the usual morning crowd, the delivery people unloading goods, the early commuters hurrying to catch trains, the children heading to school. Everything seemed ordinary, yet the memory of the stranger gave everything a sharper clarity. He felt more alert to the details of the city, the sounds, the movements, and the small struggles of the people around him. As he passed a narrow alley, a sudden sound stopped him in his tracks. It was faint at first, a strangled gasp, almost like someone struggling to breathe. He froze, listening carefully. The sound came again, louder this time, and he realized it was coming from just ahead. Without thinking, he ran toward the alley, his heart pounding, feeling a strange urgency that he could not explain. At the end of the alley, he saw the stranger from the coffee shop. The man was doubled over, clutching his throat, eyes wide with panic. His face was red and he was gasping for air. People nearby had started to gather, looking confused and unsure of what to do, but none of them moved closer. The man's instincts took over immediately. He remembered something he had read long ago about helping someone who was choking. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, placing his hands around the stranger's waist and performing the Heimlich maneuver. The struggle was intense, and for a moment, it seemed as if nothing was working. The stranger's eyes were filled with fear and desperation. The bystanders held their breath, unsure if they should help or just watch. But then, with a sudden cough and a sharp intake of breath, the obstruction cleared. The stranger's body relaxed and he fell back slightly, gasping for air but alive. Tears welled up in his eyes, not from pain but from the relief and the shock of having been saved. The man patted him on the back gently, offering what comfort he could. "You're all right now. Take it easy," he said softly, trying to calm both of them. The stranger's hands shook as he wiped at his eyes, still catching his breath. There was a moment of silence, broken only by the distant sounds of the city. The gravity of what had just happened hung in the air, a heavy but undeniable truth. The bystanders began to relax, murmuring words of encouragement and amazement at the quick thinking of the man. Some called for water. Others helped the stranger sit on the edge of a nearby dumpster, which now seemed to serve as a makeshift bench. The stranger's eyes met the man's, and for the first time he seemed to recognize him fully. The connection from the coffee shop morning becoming clear. There was a silent understanding, a recognition that something important had already begun between them. The stranger's voice was hoarse, but he managed to speak. I don't know what would have happened if you weren't here," he said, his words trembling. "Thank you. I thought I was done." The man shook his head gently. "You're all right now. That's what matters." There was a sense of relief in his tone, but also an understanding of how fragile life could be. He realized in that moment that the small act of paying for a cup of coffee the day before had created a connection, a subtle thread that now tied them together in a moment of life and death. Without that small gesture, perhaps he would have walked past this alley without noticing, and the outcome could have been very different. As the stranger's breathing steadied, the man helped him to his feet and led him to a nearby bench. The sun was higher in the sky now, casting a warm light over the scene. The stranger sat quietly, still catching his breath, and the man sat beside him, unsure if words could ever fully capture the intensity of what had just happened. But they didn't need to speak. There was a shared understanding, a deep acknowledgement of the fragile line between life and death, and the unexpected ways people could impact one another. Minutes passed, and the city continued its rhythm around them. People walked by, some glancing curiously, some absorbed in their own lives, but the two men remained focused on each other. The stranger's eyes met the man's again, and this time there was something more than gratitude. It was a recognition of the strange, delicate ways life worked. One small act, a gesture as simple as buying coffee, had rippled outward, leading to this life-saving moment. The stranger finally managed to speak more clearly. "I don't know why you helped me. I don't even know your name," he said, his voice steadier now. The man smiled softly. "I didn't need a reason. Sometimes people just need a little help. That's all there is to it." They sat in silence for a while, the city's sounds around them serving as a backdrop to the quiet moment. The man thought about how small choices could carry enormous consequences. He reflected on the stranger's life, wondering what struggles had led him to that alley, to that moment of danger. He realized that kindness and awareness could intersect in the most unexpected ways, saving lives and creating bonds that might otherwise never exist. The stranger's hands were still shaking slightly, and the man offered some water he had in his bag. The simple gesture felt important, a continuation of the support he had offered the day before. The stranger accepted it with a grateful nod, his eyes reflecting a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and something else, hope. As the minutes passed, the man realized that this moment was more than just a coincidence. Life had a way of aligning events, of bringing people together in ways that seemed small but were profoundly significant. He thought about the coffee shop, the simple smile, the small payment that had seemed insignificant at the time. In hindsight, it had been the first step toward this moment, a chain reaction of kindness and awareness that had saved a life. The stranger spoke again, his voice calmer now. I don't know how to thank you. I was in trouble and you just acted, without hesitation. The man shrugged lightly, trying to downplay the intensity of the moment. Anyone would have done the same if they saw someone in trouble. It's just what people do. You're alive now, and that's what matters. For a long while they sat together, neither fully ready to leave the bench, both processing what had just happened. The city continued to move around them, people going about their lives oblivious to the moment that had just occurred. But for the two men, time seemed to slow, emphasizing the gravity and the quiet beauty of the connection that had formed. Eventually, the stranger stood, testing his strength and balance. He nodded to the man, a gesture filled with gratitude and respect. I'll be careful from now on. I don't know what I would have done without you. The man smiled, a quiet, understanding smile. Just take care of yourself. That's all I ask. As they parted ways, the man felt a profound sense of fulfillment. It wasn't about recognition or reward. It was about the knowledge that one small act, a simple gesture, had cascaded into something life-changing. The coffee shop, the small payment, the brief connection, it all had led to this moment of saving a life. He understood now, more deeply than ever, how the smallest acts of care could have the largest consequences. Walking back to his routine, he reflected on the day's events, feeling a quiet joy mixed with humility. The world could be harsh and unpredictable, but in moments like these it also revealed its capacity for connection, compassion, and profound humanity. He knew that the memory of this day, and the stranger he had helped, would stay with him forever, a reminder of the power of simple, selfless acts and the fragile beauty of life itself. After the terrifying moment in the alley, the two men walked slowly toward a quiet street nearby. The stranger's steps were unsteady, but he kept moving, leaning slightly on the man who had saved him. There was a shared silence between them, a feeling of mutual understanding that didn't require words. It was a rare kind of connection, the kind that forms in moments when life's fragility is fully visible, and when small acts of kindness ripple into profound consequences. They reached a small bench near a park, far enough from the busy streets to feel safe and calm. The stranger sat down, taking deep breaths, trying to steady his heart that was still racing from the recent scare. The man who had helped him remained standing for a moment, observing him, making sure he was okay. The city moved around them, cars passing, people walking. Yet here in this small corner, time felt slower, gentler, and somehow more significant. After a few minutes, the stranger finally spoke, his voice quiet but steady. I want to tell you why I was like that, why I almost didn't make it. He hesitated, as if unsure whether sharing would be too much, but the man simply nodded, offering his presence as a kind of reassurance. The stranger took a deep breath, then began to speak. I have been struggling, he said, his voice low. Not physically, but with my mind. Anxiety, depression, and a lot of things I can't explain easily. That morning I had skipped breakfast, barely slept, and I was, just lost in my own thoughts. The coffee, the small moment of kindness from you yesterday, it gave me a tiny spark. It reminded me that someone else cared even for a moment. And today I almost didn't get to see another day. The man listened quietly, absorbing every word. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes, only let the stranger speak. There was a humbleness in his silence, a respect for the vulnerability being shared. The gravity of the situation weighed on both of them, not in a suffocating way, but as a reminder of how small gestures and human connection could influence lives in ways most people never notice. The stranger continued, glancing at him with a mixture of gratitude and awe. Yesterday, the coffee, the way you smiled, it was such a small thing, but it stayed with me. I didn't realize until this morning how much I had needed it. That's why I froze in the alley. I didn't know how much help I might need, and you were there. The man felt a lump in his throat. It was strange to realize how one simple decision, buying someone a coffee, could have such profound impact. He had done it without expecting anything in return, without thinking about consequences, yet here he was, sitting with someone whose life he had directly influenced. The realization was humbling and quietly powerful. I didn't do anything special, he said softly. I just noticed. You were having a hard time, and it seemed like the right thing to do. That's all. The stranger shook his head, a small, incredulous smile forming. No, it's more than that. You saw me even for a moment. You reminded me that I'm not invisible, that feeling matters. And today, because of your actions, I'm still here to feel it. I don't think I can ever repay you, but I want you to know how much it means. The man stayed quiet, letting the words sink in. There was a deep sense of connection, a bond forged in vulnerability, fear, and ultimately relief. In that moment, the ordinary act of buying a coffee had transformed into something extraordinary, a turning point that neither of them would forget. They sat together for some time, watching the sun climb higher into the sky. The stranger's breathing had steadied, and the panic from the alley had given way to reflection and understanding. There was a shared acknowledgement that life was unpredictable, fragile, and often shaped by moments of human compassion that could seem insignificant at first glance. The stranger spoke again, more calmly now, almost conversationally. I think I need to pay more attention to moments like yesterday, to people, to kindness. I've been so lost in my own world that I forgot how much a small gesture can matter. And you reminded me. The man nodded. It's easy to forget. But the world works in strange ways. Sometimes the smallest choices create the biggest changes. That coffee today, it's proof of that. They talked for a while longer, sharing small stories about their lives, their routines, and their thoughts on how people often overlook one another. It was a quiet, reflective conversation, but it held a sense of healing and understanding. The stranger's voice grew steadier, more confident, and the tension that had hung around them since the alley slowly dissipated. There was laughter at small observations and silence that felt comfortable, not empty. After some time, the stranger finally stood, testing his strength. He looked at the man with gratitude, eyes bright with renewed hope. I feel different now. Not just because of today, but because of yesterday, too. I feel like I have a chance to start noticing, to start being more present. Thank you truly. The man smiled, a quiet, unassuming smile. Just take it one step at a time. Life has a way of reminding us what matters, sometimes in ways we don't expect. You've got another day, and now it's yours to live fully. They parted ways at the park, both carrying a sense of reflection and understanding. The man walked back toward his routine, feeling a deep satisfaction, not from recognition or reward, but from the realization that his actions had meaning, even in ways he could not have anticipated. The stranger moved with more awareness, each step lighter than the last, carrying a spark of hope that had been kindled by kindness. As the day unfolded, the man thought about the chain of events that had brought them to this point. A simple act, paying for a cup of coffee, had become the first link in a series of moments that had shaped someone's life in a profound way. It was a reminder of how ordinary people, through small and seemingly insignificant actions, could make an extraordinary difference in the world. The stranger's words echoed in his mind as he continued with his day, noticing others, offering kindness, and being present for people who might be struggling quietly. He realized that human connection was fragile and powerful, sometimes hidden and often overlooked. Yet even a small gesture could ripple outward, touching lives in ways that could not be measured. By the evening, the man reflected on the events with a quiet sense of purpose. He understood that kindness was not about recognition or reward, but about seeing the humanity in others and taking small actions that could matter more than anyone could imagine. The coffee shop, the alley, the moment of fear and relief, all of it was a lesson in the invisible threads that connected people, and in the extraordinary power of everyday compassion. The stranger, somewhere in the city, felt a similar change. The fear from the morning had given way to gratitude, reflection, and a renewed sense of life. The memory of the man's smile, his calm presence, and his willingness to help had left an imprint, reminding him that even in moments of despair there was still light, still hope, still human connection waiting to be noticed and embraced. That day, both men carried the memory of their encounter forward, one as a reminder of the fragility and beauty of life, and the other as proof of the quiet power of kindness. Neither would forget how a simple act, a cup of coffee, a smile, a willingness to see another person, had changed the course of events, shaped the day, and created a bond that neither could fully explain but both understood in their hearts. In the days following the incident, the man found himself thinking often about the stranger in the alleyway, where life had nearly slipped away. He could not ignore the profound impact of that moment, nor the chain of events that had started with a simple act of buying a cup of coffee. It was a reminder that small gestures could ripple far beyond their immediate context, reaching places one could never imagine. One morning, as he walked to the coffee shop again, he spotted the stranger waiting outside, looking more composed, with a lightness in his step that had been absent before. Their eyes met, and for the first time there was no need for explanation or hesitation. They shared a quiet acknowledgement, a nod that spoke volumes about the life-saving connection that had begun in the alley and started the day before with a simple gesture. The stranger smiled as he approached. "I wanted to say again, thank you. I've been taking care of myself, being more careful and noticing moments like the one yesterday. You reminded me that life is fragile but also filled with small, meaningful connections." His voice held sincerity and a sense of newfound purpose. The man returned the smile, feeling a quiet warmth in his chest. "I'm glad. That's all I ever hoped for, that you'd be okay and that you'd notice the good in everyday moments." They entered the coffee shop together, a place that had become symbolic of both the ordinary and extraordinary ways life could intertwine. Over coffee, they talked about ordinary life, the struggles, routines, and small victories that often went unnoticed. The stranger shared stories of the challenges he faced daily, and how those moments of anxiety and struggle had started to shift because someone had seen him and acted with kindness. The man listened, understanding that his role was not to solve all problems, but to offer presence, support, and acknowledgement when it mattered most. In the following days, their paths continued to intersect. Sometimes it was intentional, other times coincidental, but each meeting carried the quiet recognition of shared history. They began to form a friendship grounded in understanding, mutual respect, and a recognition of the fragility of life. It was a bond that did not need constant attention to exist, yet it held profound significance for both of them. The stranger began to show changes in his outlook. He was more mindful of his routines, taking time to eat properly, rest, and notice the people around him. Small acts of kindness began to appear in his own life, gestures that reflected the influence of the man who had stepped in without hesitation. He held doors open for strangers, offered words of encouragement, and even small smiles that brightened the mornings of people he encountered. Life had not become perfect, but it had gained layers of meaning that had been missing before. The man, too, found himself more attuned to the rhythms of life and the presence of others. He noticed how a simple hello could brighten someone's day, how a small gesture like offering coffee or listening attentively could matter more than words could convey. The alley, the coffee shop, and the moments surrounding them had left an indelible mark on him, shaping his approach to daily life in ways he had never anticipated. One afternoon, they sat together on a park bench, reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events. The stranger spoke with gratitude and contemplation. "It's strange to think how one small act, your coffee, started all of this. I would have never believed it if someone told me that a cup of coffee could lead to me realizing how important small gestures are, and even saving my life." The man nodded thoughtfully. "Life has a way of showing us that everything is connected, often in ways we don't see immediately. The coffee, your struggle, the alley, it all reminds us that paying attention, even in small ways, can change lives." They sat quietly, watching the city around them, people moving with purpose and yet oblivious to the unseen chains of events shaping lives nearby. The man felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had played a part, however small, in influencing someone's path toward better health, awareness, and presence in the world. It was a humbling reminder that even ordinary people could impact extraordinary outcomes without realizing it. The stranger's life gradually gained a new rhythm, punctuated by moments of mindfulness and awareness of the people around him. He often recounted the alleyway incident to himself, not as a source of fear, but as a reminder of human connection, the kindness that existed even in strangers, and the fragile beauty of life that could be nurtured by small actions. In turn, the man noticed changes within himself. He found joy in being present, in noticing others' needs and responding with empathy, even in simple ways. The coffee shop became a symbol of beginnings, the ordinary moment that had created ripples far beyond the counter, beyond the simple act of kindness into life-changing consequences. Months passed, and the bond between the two men endured. Their friendship did not rely on constant contact, but on a shared understanding and the knowledge that they had been connected at a critical moment in life. It was a reminder that some relationships, born in the crucible of extraordinary circumstances, carry a depth and significance that ordinary encounters rarely achieve. One evening, as the man walked home, he reflected on the series of events that had unfolded. It started with a simple decision, something as small and seemingly inconsequential as buying a cup of coffee for a stranger. That decision led to an act of heroism, the saving of a life and the creation of a lasting connection between two individuals. It was a story that could have gone unnoticed, a quiet testament to the power of empathy, attention, and care. The stranger, sitting at home, reflected similarly. He thought about the man who had stepped in without hesitation, whose simple act had reminded him that even in the depths of struggle, people could reach out and create change. He felt gratitude not only for being alive, but for being reminded that life was filled with small opportunities to connect, to notice, and to act with compassion. In the weeks and months that followed, they continued their lives, each shaped subtly but profoundly by the experience. The man paid attention more than ever to the world around him, the subtle cues of human need, and the way small actions could ripple outward. The stranger lived with renewed purpose, recognizing the fragility and value of life, and carrying forward the lessons of connection and kindness into his own interactions. Together, they had become part of a quiet story, invisible to most but significant in its impact. A simple cup of coffee had sparked a chain reaction that saved a life, fostered understanding, and inspired both men to embrace the profound value of small, selfless acts. It was a story of human connection, of noticing, and of how ordinary actions could lead to extraordinary consequences. The city around them moved as it always did, filled with people rushing, talking, and living lives unaware of the quiet miracle that had unfolded. Yet for the two men, each day held the memory of that morning, the alleyway and the coffee shop. They carried it in small ways through attention, care, empathy, and presence in the world. And in that quiet, persistent awareness, they found meaning, connection, and a deep appreciation for the ways life could be changed by a single, simple act of kindness.